Hi team, welcome to lesson 3, genotype and phenotype of 1.9 genetics for level 1 science. Today we're going to learn about genes, karyotypes, alleles, and what dominant and recessive mean. We're going to learn about how many chromosomes humans have, explaining the difference between genotype and phenotype, which you probably don't even know what they are yet, but that's cool. And then explain the difference between homozygous and heterozygous genotypes. And if you haven't worked out already, there are lots of big words in this topic. It's quite a chunky lesson today, and you get a catch-up lesson tomorrow if you need it, so just hang in there. Okay, so we've talked about genes before. Here is the official definition. It is a section of DNA coding for a specific protein, and that results in the expression of a particular trait. So hopefully you know what traits are. They're just things about our body that we can see, and some of them we can't see. They are determined by those proteins. We have got thousands, if not more, different genes. And as I talked about yesterday when we looked at bases, the order of the bases in a particular section of DNA, that's called the base sequence, that is what determines the protein that the gene codes for. So the A's, the T's, the G's, and the C's, the order that they go in determines what the protein looks like and therefore what the trait looks like. And one gene may be thousands of base pairs long. So that's thousands of A's, T's, G's, and C's for one gene, which expresses one protein. So it's an incredibly complex genetic code that we need to remember kind of the scale of in our brain. Okay, karyotype. Karyotype is a photo or a description of all of the chromosomes in an organism's genome. So you could look at monkeys and you would look at all of their chromosomes. You could look at zebrafish and look at all of their chromosomes. That's going to be their karyotype. Humans have got 23 pairs of chromosomes, so that's 46 total. And we've got 22 homologous pairs. So homologous kind of means that they go together, they're the same. And then 2 sex chromosomes. So you might have heard about females being XX and males being XY. That is our 2 sex chromosomes. So the 2 chromosomes that you get determines whether you are a female or a male. And in those 22 homologous pairs, and your sex chromosomes actually, in all of the pairs, there is 1 chromosome from your mum and 1 chromosome from your dad. So that is why you have got 2 copies of every single chromosome, and they contain both the same genes, but they might be slightly different versions of the same gene. So here's a little animation to show that. So we have got 22 pairs that look like this. Some of them are different lengths. They all contain different genes. And then down the bottom here, we've got our X and Y chromosomes. So this person would be a male because they've got an X and a Y. If there was 2 X's, they would be a female. Okay, I just talked about if your mum and dad gave you 2 different versions of a gene, those versions are called alleles. So they are different versions of genes due to a different base sequence. So if on your mum's chromosome, here we go. If on your chromosome that you got from your mum, it had a big long base sequence, and then the letters or the bases on the version that you inherited from your dad, if the letters are in a different order or there is slight differences in the letters, they will be different, and they are called different alleles. So, blah, 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 blah. We've already looked at this first bit. So, for example, the gene that codes for freckles has got 2 alleles, no freckles and freckles. Your mum might give you the freckles gene, but your dad might not. And then that's when we have to figure out which one will you end up with. If you get 2 different alleles, how do you know what trait you're going to have? And bear in mind, it's a lot more complicated than this. This is very, very simplified, but it's a cool example of how things can work out. So we have got two different types of alleles that you need to know about. We have got dominant and recessive. Dominant alleles are represented by a capital letter, and recessive alleles are represented by a little letter. So the majority of the time, one allele is going to be dominant over another. And if it is dominant, that means that it will override the recessive allele, and that version of the trait will always be seen if it's in the chromosomes that you inherit. So in our example about freckles would be dominant, so that's a capital F. No freckles is recessive, so that's a little f. So the two alleles that you inherit from your parents will determine if you have freckles or not. So if you inherit one of the big F's, it will be dominant and it will be shown and you will have freckles. If you inherit two little F's from both parents, then you won't have freckles. So the combination of those two alleles, or those two letters, on our two chromosomes that you inherit from our parents is called the genotype. So the genotype is the letters, and the genotype is the alleles. The result of that genotype and the way that it's actually expressed or shown on the outside of your body, that is called the phenotype. So, for example, down here in this yellow box, the genotype might be that you have got one blue, one green, one blue, two green, one blue stripes. Those are different alleles. And that codes for the phenotype, which is that you've got green eyes, blue body, black wings, and black legs. Very, very simplified version. But the phenotype is what you see on the outside. The genotype is the two alleles that you inherit. If the dominant allele is in your genotype, it's always going to be expressed or shown in the phenotype. So if freckles, big F, is in your genotype, you will have freckles. If there is no big F, no freckles allele, you will not get freckles. So there are 3 different genotypes that you need to know and 2 different phenotypes you need to know at level 1. This is the last slide, so just hang in there. I know it's a lot of brain work. We're going to practice this heaps. So they always follow the same pattern for genes at level 1. You don't need to know any other explanation. We're going to go back to our freckles example from before. Okay, so these are our 3 possible genotypes. We can have big F, little f. We can have big F, or we can have little f, little f. This blue guy has got 2 different size letters or 2 different alleles. That is called heterozygous. So hetero means different, right? So heterosexual means you like the opposite sex, so you're 2 different sexes. And the phenotype here would be freckles, because there is a big F. There is the dominant allele in your genotype. These green guys over here, they are homozygous. So homo means same. Think about homosexuals, liking the same sex. Okay, so 2 big F's or 2 little f's. We can say they are homozygous dominant if they're 2 big F's, or homozygous recessive if they're 2 little f's. Homozygous dominant is obviously going to have freckles because it's got 2 big F's, the dominant allele. However, this one has got no big F. So it's homozygous recessive, there will be no freckles in the phenotype. The letters are not always F, but the pattern stays the same. So if I'm talking about skin colour, I might use S. Or if I'm talking about nose length, I might be using the letter N. The letters change, but the patterns stay the same. Okay. That is all for today. You have got a catch-up lesson for tomorrow that you can kind of process that. There's lots of pages in this iPad to do, so check your daily work plan, and we'll pick back up on this later.